My parents want me to marry their choice so they can control my inheritance, literally. My grandfather's lawyer called me 3 days before my 23rd birthday to tell me I was about to inherit $12 million. I was sitting in my apartment eating ramen for the 4th night in a row when the phone rang. The lawyer, a man named Frederick Dalton who spoke in careful, measured tones, explained that my maternal grandfather had died 6 months ago and left his entire estate to me. The will had been in probate all this time, and I'd known nothing about it because my parents had intercepted all the legal correspondence. Frederick had finally tracked me down through my employer after my parents stopped responding to his calls. Your grandfather was very specific in his instructions, Frederick said. He wanted you to have complete financial independence. He was concerned about your parents' influence over your life. I asked how my parents even knew about the inheritance when I didn't. Frederick explained they'd been listed as emergency contacts in my grandfather's medical records. The hospital had called them when he died, and they'd attended the will reading. They knew everything. They just chose not to tell me. That night, my mother called asking if I'd be home this weekend. Her voice had that artificially sweet tone she used when she wanted something. We need to discuss something important as a family, she said. I told her I was busy with work, but she insisted. It's about your future. We've found someone perfect for you. I felt my stomach drop. My parents had been pressuring me to date their friend's son since I graduated college, but I'd always refused. This sounded different, though, more urgent. I asked what she meant by perfect, and she laughed. You'll see this weekend. Just come home Friday night. We're having dinner with the Whitmore family. I'd never heard that name before. When I pressed for details, my mother said Evan Whitmore was a 38-year-old businessman who'd recently moved back to town. His family was very prominent, very wealthy, very interested in a union between our families. The word union made my skin crawl. I told her I wasn't interested in meeting anyone, and she got quiet. We weren't asking, Nathan. We need you to do this for the family. I drove to my parents' house Friday evening with a growing sense of dread. My father met me at the door with a forced smile and a handshake that lingered too long. Good to see you, son. Come in, come in. The Whitmores are already here. In the living room sat a couple in their 60s and a man who must have been Evan. He was tall and broad, with graying hair and an expensive suit. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Calculating, maybe. My mother ushered everyone to the dining room where she'd prepared an elaborate meal. Roasted chicken, 3 side dishes, homemade rolls. She only cooked like this when she was trying to impress someone. Throughout dinner, Evan's parents dominated the conversation, talking about their real estate holdings and investment properties. Evan himself was quiet, watching me with that same calculating look. My parents laughed at every joke Evan's father made and complimented his mother's jewelry. It was painful to watch. After dessert, my father suggested Evan and I take a walk around the property. It wasn't really a suggestion. Evan stood and gestured toward the back door. We walked in silence across the lawn toward the old shed where I used to play as a kid. Evan finally spoke when we were out of earshot of the house. You don't know about the inheritance yet, do you? His voice was different now, direct. I stopped walking and turned to face him. What are you talking about? He pulled out his phone and showed me a document. It was a copy of my grandfather's will with my name highlighted in yellow. $12 million to Nathan Lawrence upon his 23rd birthday. Your parents approached my family 3 months ago with a proposal, Evan explained. They wanted me to marry you before your birthday. In exchange, they'd ensure I got power of attorney over your inheritance. My legs felt weak. Why would you agree to that? Evan's expression softened slightly. I didn't. Not really. My parents are the ones pushing this. They see dollar signs. But I thought you should know what's happening before anyone springs it on you. I asked why he'd tell me this if it ruined his parents' plan. He shrugged. Because using someone's sexuality against them to steal their money is disgusting. Your parents told my family you're gay and wouldn't inherit anything if your grandfather knew. They're counting on you being desperate to hide it. How did they even know I was gay? I'd never told them. I'd never told anyone in my family. Evan must have seen the panic on my face because he continued talking. They've been monitoring your social media, apparently. Some photos from last Pride. I felt like the ground was tilting under my feet. My parents had known I was gay, and instead of confronting me or disowning me, they'd weaponized it. They'd found a way to use my identity as leverage for financial gain. Evan checked his watch and said we should head back before our parents got suspicious. I'll play along for now, he said, but you need to contact your grandfather's lawyer immediately. Find out what protections are in the will. There has to be something that prevents this kind of manipulation. Back in the house, my mother was pouring coffee and smiling at Evan's mother. They looked like old friends already. My father pulled me aside and asked how the walk went. Evan seems like a good match, don't you think? Mature, established. You could do a lot worse. I mumbled something non-committal and said I needed to use the bathroom. Instead, I locked myself in my old bedroom and called Frederick Dalton. It was 8 p.m, but he answered. I need to know everything about my grandfather's will. Specifically, anything that prevents my parents from accessing the money. Frederick was quiet for a moment. Your grandfather included several safeguards. The inheritance is in an irrevocable trust that activates on your 23rd birthday. Your parents can't touch it. But there is one clause that concerns me now. The clause stated that if I were to marry before receiving the inheritance, my spouse would automatically be listed as a co-beneficiary with equal access to the trust. My grandfather had written this decades ago when he assumed I'd marry a woman and want to share my wealth with her. He never imagined my parents would use it to steal from me. So if I marry Evan before my birthday, he gets half the money? I asked. Frederick corrected me. Not exactly. If you marry him and he's listed as your spouse on the trust documents, he gets equal access, meaning he could drain the entire account if he wanted. The trust was designed to protect you from your parents, not from a spouse. I asked what happened if I just refused to marry Evan. Frederick explained that my parents couldn't force me legally, but they'd clearly found other ways to pressure me. Your grandfather would be devastated if he knew what they were planning. He specifically wanted you free from their control. I thanked Frederick and hung up. When I came back downstairs, my father announced that Evan had agreed to see me again next weekend. Maybe dinner and a movie, my mother suggested. Something casual where you two can get to know each other better. Evan met my eyes across the room and gave an almost imperceptible nod. He was buying me time. I left my parents' house and drove straight to my best friend Connor's apartment. Connor had been my roommate in college and knew I was gay. He was one of maybe 3 people in my life I actually trusted. I explained everything while pacing his living room. The inheritance, the marriage scheme, my parents' surveillance of my social media. Connor listened without interrupting until I finished. They're trying to pimp you out for money, he said flatly. That's actually insane. I asked what I should do. Connor thought for a minute. You need evidence. If they're monitoring your social media, they're probably doing other things too. Check your apartment for cameras or tracking devices. Change all your passwords. And for the love of God, don't marry some random guy your parents picked out. The next morning, I bought a bug detector online and swept my apartment. I found a GPS tracker under my car, a listening device in my living room smoke detector, and a small camera behind my bathroom mirror. All of them were commercial grade, not cheap. My parents had spent real money surveilling me. I documented everything with photos and left the devices in place. I needed them to think they still had eyes on me. That week, I researched everything about Evan Whitmore. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the Southeast. He'd been married once before to a woman, divorced 5 years ago with no kids. His social media was sparse, but professional. Nothing that indicated whether he was actually trustworthy or just playing a longer game. I also dug into my parents' finances using public records. My father worked in insurance sales and made decent money, but not nearly enough to explain their lifestyle. Their house was worth maybe $400,000, but they drove expensive cars and belonged to a country club. I found 3 credit cards maxed out in my father's name and a second mortgage on the house taken out last year. They were drowning in debt, which explained why they needed my inheritance so desperately. Frederick Dalton called Thursday afternoon with more information. I spoke with your grandfather's financial advisor. The trust fund is scheduled to transfer to your control at midnight on your birthday. But your parents have been making inquiries about contesting the will. They're claiming your grandfather was mentally incompetent when he wrote it. That wouldn't work though, right? Frederick said it would be difficult to prove since multiple doctors had evaluated my grandfather before his death and found him mentally sound. But it would tie up the money in court for years. My parents were building a backup plan in case the marriage scheme failed. Friday night, Evan called my cell phone directly. We need to meet, somewhere your parents won't know about. We arranged to meet at a diner 40 minutes away. I drove there checking my mirrors constantly for anyone following me. Evan was already in a back booth when I arrived. He looked tired. My parents are pushing hard for this marriage, he said without preamble. They want a wedding date set within the month, before your birthday. I asked why his parents cared so much about my money. Evan explained that his family's hotel chain was failing. They'd overextended during the pandemic and never recovered. They need a cash infusion to avoid bankruptcy. $12 million would save everything. Your parents promised them half if they could get me to marry you and control the trust. So everyone was conspiring to rob me. My parents needed money to pay their debts. Evan's parents needed money to save their business, and I was just a commodity to be traded. I'm not going along with it, Evan said firmly. I wanted you to know that. Whatever happens, I won't marry you for your money. I appreciated that, but I wasn't sure I believed him. He had a lot to lose if his family's business failed. Maybe he was just playing the long game, trying to earn my trust before betraying me. Over the next week, my parents called me 6 times. Each conversation was some variation of asking about Evan and suggesting we spend more time together. My mother sent me articles about gay marriage becoming more accepted. My father forwarded me photos of expensive honeymoon destinations. They were being so obvious, it would have been funny if it weren't so sinister. I started recording every phone call and saving every text message. I consulted with Frederick Dalton about my legal options. He suggested filing for a restraining order against my parents based on the surveillance equipment, but that would tip them off that I knew about everything. Better to keep playing along until my birthday passed and the trust activated. Then I'd have the money secured and could deal with them from a position of power. Connor helped me open a new bank account that my parents didn't know about and transfer all my current savings. I started parking my car in different locations and using rideshare apps to get around. Every time I left my apartment, I changed my routine. 2 weeks before my birthday, my mother called crying. We need to talk, Nathan. Please come home. It's It's an emergency. I asked what was wrong, and she said my father had been in a car accident. Nothing serious, but he was shaken up and wanted to see me. I knew this was probably a trap, but I couldn't ignore it completely. I drove to their house with my phone recording audio in my pocket. My father was fine. He was sitting in the living room with a bandage on his forehead that looked suspiciously theatrical. My mother ushered me in and immediately started talking about how fragile life was and how important family was. "We need to know you're taken care of," she said. "That's why this thing with Evan is so important. You need stability." I asked what Evan had to do with my father's accident. My mother exchanged a glance with my father. "Evan's been so good to us during this difficult time. He even offered to help with medical bills. He's exactly the kind of man you should settle down with." There it was. They were using my father's fake accident to push the marriage timeline. I told them I barely knew Evan and wasn't interested in rushing into anything. My father stood up suddenly. "You're not a child anymore, Nathan. It's time to think about your future, about what's best for this family." I asked what my personal life had to do with the family. My mother started crying again. "We raised you. We sacrificed everything for you. The least you can do is consider our input on something this important." I wanted to scream that their input was just a plan to steal from me. Instead, I said I needed time to think and left before they could stop me. That night, Evan called again. "My parents know you're stalling. They're getting desperate. They've started talking about more aggressive approaches." "Like what?" Evan hesitated. "Like having you declared mentally incompetent, or claiming you're being manipulated by outside influences. They've been consulting with lawyers about how to break the trust." My hands started shaking. My own parents were planning to have me institutionalized so they could control my money. This had gone from manipulative to dangerous. Frederick Dalton confirmed Evan's warning the next day. "Your parents filed a petition yesterday claiming you're suffering from diminished capacity due to undisclosed mental health issues. They're trying to get guardianship before your birthday." How was that even possible when I'd never been diagnosed with anything? Frederick explained they'd found a doctor willing to sign an affidavit saying I exhibited concerning behaviors. The doctor had never actually met me, but he'd reviewed their account of my isolation, poor financial decisions, and concerning lifestyle choices. It was all fabricated, but it would require a court hearing to disprove. "The hearing is scheduled for 5 days from now," Frederick said. 3 days before your birthday. If they succeed, they'll be appointed as your legal guardians, with control over your finances. I felt like I was suffocating. Connor helped me find a psychiatrist willing to see me immediately and provide a professional evaluation. Dr. Ramona Yates spent 3 hours with me conducting tests and interviews. At the end, she wrote a detailed report confirming I was mentally sound, capable of managing my own affairs, and showed no signs of diminished capacity. "Your parents are engaging in financial abuse," she said bluntly. "This kind of manipulation is more common than people think, especially when large inheritances are involved." I asked if her evaluation would be enough to stop the guardianship petition. She said it should be, but we'd need to present it at the hearing. She agreed to testify on my behalf. The day before the hearing, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I answered the door with my phone recording video from my pocket. "Nathan, please, you have to understand we're doing this for you." She tried to push past me into the apartment, but I blocked her. "Doing what? Trying to steal my inheritance?" Her face changed. The sweet, concerned mother act dropped completely. "That money should be ours. We're your parents. We raised you. Your grandfather had no right to cut us out." There it was, the truth finally coming out. I asked why she thought she was entitled to money that wasn't hers. My mother's voice got louder. "Because we've had to deal with you being the way you are. Do you know how embarrassing it is? Our son, who we raised to be normal, turning out like this? We deserve compensation for that humiliation." I felt like I'd been punched. My own mother thought my sexuality was something I owed her money for. She saw my inheritance as payment for the burden of having a gay son. I told her to leave before I called the police. She started crying again, but it was angry crying this time. "Fine. You'll see what happens tomorrow in court. The judge will see you're not capable of handling money. You'll be declared incompetent, and we'll get everything we should have gotten from the start." After she left, I called Frederick immediately and sent him the video. He said it was perfect evidence of their actual motives. "This shows clear intent to defraud. The judge will see right through their guardianship petition." The hearing happened in a small courtroom with just the judge, lawyers, my parents, and me. My parents' attorney presented their case first. He showed the affidavit from the doctor who'd never met me, claiming I exhibited poor judgment and unstable behavior. He referenced my alternative lifestyle and suggested I was being influenced by people who wanted access to my inheritance. Then Frederick stood up and presented Dr. Yates's evaluation. She testified for 20 minutes about my mental competence. Then Frederick played the video of my mother admitting they were trying to steal the inheritance. The judge's expression changed from neutral to disgusted as he watched. My parents' lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him. "I've seen enough. This petition is denied. Not only that, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for investigation of attempted fraud and financial abuse." My mother started crying for real this time. My father just stared at the table. The judge continued. "Mr. Lawrence will receive his inheritance as his grandfather intended. His parents are prohibited from contacting him regarding financial matters. This court will not be used as a tool for elder abuse or exploitation. We left the courthouse, and my parents tried to approach me in the parking lot. Frederick stepped between us. My client has nothing to say to you. Any further contact will be considered harassment. My father shouted after me. You're destroying this family over money. Your grandfather would be ashamed. I turned back and looked at him. Grandfather left me the money specifically to get away from people like you. He knew exactly what you were. 2 days later, at midnight, my phone pinged with a notification. The trust had activated. $12 million was now in an account only I could access. I sat in my apartment staring at the number, trying to process what it meant. Financial security, freedom, the ability to live my life without anyone's approval or interference. The next morning, Frederick called with an update. The district attorney is moving forward with charges against your parents, attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and filing false legal documents. They're looking at possible jail time. I asked if I had to participate in the prosecution. Frederick said I'd likely be called as a witness, but the state was handling the case. Your parents are also being sued by the Whitmore family. Apparently, they'd received a $50,000 advance payment to facilitate the marriage. The Whitmores want their money back. Everything was falling apart for my parents, and I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for them. They'd tried to institutionalize me, steal my inheritance, and sell me to a stranger. Whatever consequences they faced, they'd earned. Evan called that afternoon. I wanted to apologize for my family's involvement. We had no right to go along with any of this. I told him I appreciated him warning me, even though I still wasn't sure of his motives. He laughed. My motive was not wanting to be part of something disgusting. I'm not interested in marrying someone for their money, and I'm definitely not interested in marrying someone who doesn't want to marry me. We talked for a while longer. He was actually interesting when he wasn't being forced into a corporate marriage arrangement. He'd studied architecture before taking over the family business and hated the hotel industry. His parents had pressured him his whole life to be someone he wasn't. 3 weeks after my birthday, my parents' criminal trial started. I testified about the surveillance equipment, the marriage pressure, and the guardianship petition. The video of my mother admitting they wanted my money was played in court. My father's financial records were entered as evidence, showing their massive debts and the $50,000 payment from the Whitmores. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. My mother sobbed as the judge sentenced them each to 18 months in prison, followed by 5 years probation. They were also ordered to pay restitution to me for legal fees and emotional damages. The amount was symbolic since they had no money, but it felt good to have their crimes officially acknowledged. The Whitmore family's hotel chain filed for bankruptcy 2 months later. Evan called to tell me his parents were furious and blamed me for everything. They're saying if you'd just gone along with the marriage, everyone would have been fine. I pointed out that everyone except me would have been fine. Evan agreed. I'm cutting ties with them. I should have done it years ago, but I kept hoping they'd change. I understood that feeling too well, hoping your parents would suddenly become the people you needed them to be. We started meeting for coffee occasionally, just as friends. He was rebuilding his life away from his family's expectations, and I was learning how to live with financial freedom I'd never imagined having. 6 months after my birthday, I used some of the inheritance money to start a non-profit, helping LGBTQ young adults whose families had rejected them. I'd learned that financial abuse often went hand in hand with other types of control and manipulation. The organization provided legal services, housing assistance, and mental health support. Connor became the program director. Dr. Yates joined our board. Even Frederick Dalton volunteered his legal expertise pro bono. We helped 15 people in our first 6 months, each with their own story of family betrayal and survival. My parents were released from prison after serving their full sentences. They tried to reach out through my aunt, but I'd made my boundaries clear. I wasn't interested in a relationship with people who'd seen me as an ATM rather than a son. Some people said I should forgive them, that family was important. But I'd learned that real family doesn't try to institutionalize you to steal your money. Real family doesn't monitor your private life looking for leverage. Real family doesn't sell you to strangers for debt payment. Evan and I stayed friends, though people kept asking if we were dating. We weren't. But he understood my situation in a way most people couldn't. He'd also been used as a pawn in someone else's financial schemes. We'd both survived families who saw us as resources rather than people. A year after everything ended, I got a letter from my grandfather's estate attorney. Hidden in the trust documents was a note my grandfather had written before he died. Frederick had only just discovered it in the archives. The note was addressed to me, written in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. Nathan, if you're reading this, it means my safeguards worked and you received your inheritance despite whatever your parents tried. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them while I was alive. I saw how they used and controlled you. I hope this money gives you the freedom to build a life on your own terms. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting it. You deserve every penny, not because of anything you did, but because you're my grandson and I love you. Use it wisely. Use it to help others if you can, and most importantly, use it to be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. I read the note 3 times sitting in my apartment with tears running down my face. My grandfather had seen everything, He'd known exactly what my parents were and had done everything in his power to give me an escape route. The money was never about the amount. It was about giving me the choice to walk away from people who would hurt me. And I had. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.